Single father discovers an incredible fortune, the surprising truth behind his neighbor's gates. Mike Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow with a grease-stained rag, frowning at the stubborn bolt refusing to budge on the rusted engine in front of him. His small auto repair shop stuttered along like an old car on bad roads, and every day was a grind, filled with the weight of uncertainty and unrelenting financial strain. As a single father to Mia, his bright and curious 10-year-old daughter, the burden felt heavier. Each day he worked, all he could envision was the sputtering engine of his dreams, fading more and more as time ticked by. A muffled conversation from the sidewalk snapped his attention away from the engine's complexities. Two neighbors were gossiping about Mr. Caldwell, the reclusive millionaire living just beyond towering gates. Curiosity piqued, Mike leaned back, his heart racing at the thought of those riches, even if the idea sparked irritation deep within. The weight of envy sat heavily on his chest, but there was a flicker of determination ignited within him. If Caldwell had money, why couldn't he? Why couldn't he provide Mia with a life unburdened by worry? The thought of uncovering Caldwell's fortune consumed him. He imagined how everything could change, but as he began to dig into the tales of the old man, the thrill faded into something far deeper. Caldwell's wealth, it seemed, was not built on mere fortune. It was a complex legacy marred by hard work and sacrifice, tangled in webs of injustice faced by his family. Mike found himself wrestling with a moral dilemma. To expose the truth might mean betrayal, but was it a betrayal of a man or a society that had plagued his community with inequity? His muscles tightened as he churned through the information. What if he was wrong? What if he pushed too hard and unraveled something better left undiscovered? The louder those questions grew, the more Mike felt like he was suffocating. He glanced at Mia, who was helping with the shop, and his heart twisted. Could he risk their only source of income, the life they had, all for this pursuit? Was his desperation driving him to act unethically? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Just as Mike was beginning to connect the dots, he felt the cold shadow of intimidation fall over him. An anonymous note slipped under the shop door warned him to back off, but the implications it carried struck terror deep in his gut. Decisions loomed ominously, leaving him caught in a web of uncertainty. He shook his head, a tightening knot forming in his chest as the chatter of threats and retaliation echoed in his mind. He hesitated on the precipice of confrontation, the enormity of potential ruin heavy in the air. Standing at the gates of Mr. Caldwell's mansion, he felt a profound sense of gravity. It was no longer just about money or personal gain. It was about dignity, restitution, challenging the powerful. Would he take that step, knowing it could turn his life upside down? He sensed a collision course with forces far greater than himself, and just as he prepared to step towards the unknown, a shadow loomed behind him, an added weight that whispered of the consequences that lay ahead. Would he summon the courage to fight back, or would fear pull him back into the shadows? Mike stood frozen, the shadows around him thickening as the enormity of his decision weighed on his shoulders. Memories of Mia's laughter filled his mind, puncturing his resolve with images of her innocence. Would she ever understand why her father chose to plunge into a storm that could uproot their lives? The gate loomed tall and formidable, a barrier not just to Caldwell's estate, but to everything Mike feared. As he turned, the figure behind him stepped into view. It was Derek, a longtime friend and mechanic from a nearby shop. Concern etched across Derek's face, the bond of friendship coupled with unspoken worries. "You shouldn't be here, Mike. "This place, it's trouble," he said, glancing nervously toward the mansion, as if Caldwell himself might emerge at any moment. "I know," Mike muttered, barely audible. The adrenaline coursed through him, pushing him toward action, while simultaneously binding him with fear. What was he really prepared to risk for this? But what if it's not just about me? What if this could change the narrative, bring hope? "Hope doesn't always come hand in hand with danger," Derek replied, his voice steady but insistent. He stepped closer, lowering his tone. "You've got Mia to think about. Is this worth the risk?" The question became a haunting echo in his mind. Mike shifted uneasily, caught between desire for change and the stark reality of potential consequences. I can't just do nothing. I won't let my life be dictated by fear anymore." As the words left his mouth, something flickered within him, an ember of determination pushing him forward. Taking a deep breath, Mike looked at the mansion, imagining the stories hidden behind its walls, the truths waiting to be uncovered. The intimidation of that anonymous note was palpable, yet it only stoked the fire within him. He realized the risk of inaction might be greater than he believed. A little voice nagged at him. It was fear speaking, but it was time to silence it. "Fine," Derek relented, anxiety still lurking in his eyes. "But if you're doing this, please be careful."
Get information, not confrontation. With each reassuring nod from Derek, a plan started to crystallize in Mike's mind. The first step was gathering intel discreetly, observing what he could about Caldwell's operations and interactions. The fate of his own life couldn't depend on one impulsive move. He'd need strategy. Igniting the engine of his ambition required more than curiosity. It required an educated approach. "Thanks for the support, Derek," he said, feeling a rush of appreciation for his friend's cautionary advice. "I'll start small, get the lay of the land before making any big moves." Determined, Mike walked away from the gates, heart thudding in his chest, but his mind racing with possibilities. What connections could he make? Which whispers might lead him closer to truths buried beneath Caldwell's wealth? Each step he took felt like a shift, a pivot from existing to truly living. Each small decision could lead to monumental change. As the evening sun dipped low, casting long shadows, Mike returned to the workshop. The routine of his auto repair shop reminded him of his grounded reality. Yet as he tightened a bolt on a customer's car, his mind raced with strategies. The conversations he heard today were a starting line, not a finish. He would investigate local connections, reach out to others in the community, and piece together the local lore. But what Mike didn't know was that the paths he was about to tread would forge unexpected alliances and provoke more dangers than he anticipated. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts, pulling him into the present. When he opened it, standing there was a stranger with a familiar face, a former classmate from high school. The man smiled, but Mike could see worry pooling in his eyes. "Hey, Mike, can we talk? It's about Caldwell." The intensity of the situation surged again. Mike sensed that this could either be a lifeline in his quest or lead him deeper into a maze of trouble. As the door swung wider, he was pulled into a conversation that could alter his fate forever. Mike stepped aside to let the former classmate into the workshop, his heart racing with anticipation. The man, Eric, had always been a lively presence back in school, known for his charm and easy laughter. Yet now, the lines of concern etched on Eric's brow transformed his familiar face into something distinctly serious. "What's going on, Eric?" Mike asked, closing the door behind them, the sound muffled by the thick walls of the workshop. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing on the precipice of something significant. "I heard you were looking into Caldwell," Eric began, his voice low, as if afraid the very walls might betray them. "Word travels fast in this town, you know how it is. I know things about him that you might find useful." Mike felt a surge of curiosity. Eric had always been well connected, a point of reference for local gossip and happenings. "What do you know?" he asked, pressed, his mind racing ahead. Perhaps this was the opportunity he needed to unravel the enigma surrounding Caldwell. Caldwell operates a legitimate business, but he's involved in some shady deals too. People talk. Car parts, fencing stolen goods, that kind of thing. Eric's eyes darted to the side, almost as if he expected Caldwell himself to step through the door. He's not just some wealthy businessman. There are rumors about illegal activities under his watch. Mike's pulse quickened. The stakes were becoming clearer. "Can you be more specific?" He leaned closer, hungry for information, but aware of the heavy weight that came with it. Eric hesitated, taking a glance towards the workshop's assortment of tools and parts before speaking again. "I've seen trucks come in the middle of the night filled with stuff that shouldn't be there. I've heard hushed discussions about selling more than just car parts. He has connections." Each revelation struck Mike like a hammer. This wasn't just about Caldwell as an enemy. This was a tangled web of deceit that could entrap him if he wasn't careful. The images of Mia surfaced again, grounding him amidst rising storm clouds of ambition and fear. "Why are you telling me this?" Mike asked, curbing his emotions. He needed to understand Eric's motives. There had to be a reason behind this unsolicited intel. "Because Caldwell has a lot of influence, and I'm not sure you're prepared for what you're getting into. But I can help. I've got contacts who can feed us more information. Maybe we can, I don't know, bring him down together?" Eric proposed, his voice resolute yet tinged with uncertainty. Mike's mind reeled. The instinct to take down Caldwell was powerful, but so was the weight of his own recklessness. Could he trust Eric? Did he really want to walk this dangerous path, especially considering the impact it could have on Mia? "Bringing him down might be a lofty goal," Mike said slowly, deliberating over his words. "But right now, I need to gather information, not launch a war." "Then let's gather," Eric said, determination shining through his initial hesitation. "Information is power, and you can play this smart. I can introduce you to people in the know, connections you won't gain on your own." Mike nodded, the ember of determination growing warmer within him. It was more than just curiosity now. It was about building bridges, understanding the ramifications of each move, and perhaps, finally, empowering himself in the face of adversity. As they discussed strategies, potential contacts, and methods of inquiry, Mike realized that he wasn't just collecting facts. He was learning to navigate a complex maze. Each question revealed not only more about Caldwell, but also aspects of himself. His capacity for strategizing, his resilience in face of fear, and his determination to change the trajectory of his life. Yet as the plans began to come together, Mike's gut twisted. The deeper he went, the more danger he invited, not just for himself, but for Mia. To tread carefully, balancing ambition with the reality of the impending risks. Then it dawned on him, a thought that nearly knocked him back. What if, in trying to protect Mia, he unknowingly placed her in even greater jeopardy? With this revelation simmering in his mind, Mike knew he had to act, but this time his actions would need to be calculated with a laser focus on consequences. "Let's meet again tomorrow, talk more about the next steps," Mike suggested, feeling the weight of their budding alliance. As Eric left, Mike stood alone for a moment, processing the gravity of the decisions ahead of him. If he was to climb the mountain of truth about Caldwell, he would need more than courage. He needed precision, foresight, and a readiness for battle against not just an adversary, but against the shadows of his own fears. Tomorrow would bring another leap into the unknown, but this time he would step forward armed with not only information, but a growing understanding of his own strengths. With determination building, he returned to work, ready to face the challenges that loomed ahead. Yet the nagging doubt lingered. Had he crossed a threshold that couldn't be uncrossed? Would he awaken forces that he could no longer contain? The moment of truth approached, as he sensed the tension tightening around him, ready for the next move that could change everything. Mike spent the night wrestling with the revelations that had surfaced. He lay in bed, replaying Eric's words, fragments of unease swirling in his mind. Caldwell's shadow stretched over the horizon of his aspirations. Each piece of information seemed to illuminate a dangerous path he had inadvertently stepped onto, leading him deeper into a labyrinth of deception and risk. By morning, Mike had made a decision, one that felt monumental. He would adopt a dual strategy: gather intel on Caldwell while reinforcing his commitment to his family, especially Mia. The stakes were now personal. The quest for truth had transformed into a shield for her safety. He was determined to cultivate a proactive mindset, one that would empower him as he stepped into the fray. As he opened his workshop, he was greeted by the familiar scent of oil and metal, an environment that always anchored him. Today, it would be different. He wouldn't just fix broken machines, but would also repair his own fragmented resolve. Turning on his tools, Mike began to work, his hands moving mechanically while his mind churned with anticipation. He needed to plan their next meeting. The gathering of information would not only bolster his case against Caldwell, but also clarify his own objectives. Once he had finished for the day, Mike grabbed his notebook. This was more than just a collection of notes. It was a blueprint for the future he sought to forge. He penned ideas for questions to ask Eric and strategies to approach Caldwell's associates. Each phrase, crafted in ink, resonated with a sense of urgency and purpose. Later, he met Eric. At a local diner, the clatter of dishes and low hum of conversation creating a backdrop to their muted conspiration. Mike felt the determined energy pulsing through him as he outlined his thoughts, catching Eric off guard with his newfound assertiveness. "I want to play this smart," Mike stated, punctuating his commitment to gather information without igniting unnecessary conflict. "We need to understand Caldwell's operations from the ground up. We can't force a confrontation until we know exactly what we're dealing with." Eric nodded, respect gleaming in his eyes. "I didn't see this side of you before. You're taking the lead." As they discussed potential leads, Mike's mind wandered to the underlying tension between ambition and morality. He was no longer a passive player. He was forming alliances, strategizing moves that required both intellect and ethical consideration. Would he be willing to compromise his values for the sake of achieving a goal? The question lingered, gnawing at him. What if obtaining the truth meant resorting to methods he had once deemed unacceptable? Would he cross that line if it meant protecting Mia? The weight of decision-making pressed upon him, mirroring the pressure to uphold his integrity. He felt the pang of doubt creep in as they prepared to leave the diner, but it was quelled by an emerging clarity. Engaging in this pursuit was not just about Caldwell. It was about his own evolution as a man, a father willing to rise, confront challenges, and redefine his future. Deep in thought, he finished his coffee and grabbed his jacket. It was time to act. Evaluating the environment around him, he caught reflections of light along the pavement, a metaphor for the clarity he sought. Later that evening, Mike returned home. He glanced at Mia as she worked on her homework, illuminated by the warm glow of a desk lamp. The innocence in her focus reminded him of the stakes at hand. He decided right then not to shield her from what was happening, but to involve her subtly, teaching her about courage and resilience, values he wished to impart while navigating this complexity. "You know, Mia, sometimes we have to face tough challenges," he began, watching to gauge her reaction. During their conversations over the next days, he introduced her to concepts of truth and justice. They spoke about standing firm in the face of adversity, drawing parallels between her educational challenges and his own burgeoning confrontation with Caldwell. As he nurtured this bond with her, Mike grew more resolute. With each passing conversation, he discovered strength he never knew he possessed, a moral compass guiding him through the shadows. Yet, as he prepared for the next meeting with Eric, doubt still loomed. Would he truly be able to confront Caldwell without losing parts of himself in the process? Tomorrow promised further revelations. Would he find assurance in his newfound path? Or would the shadows of his past threaten to engulf him as he sought to step into a brighter future? The balance hung precariously before him. As dawn broke, Mike's mind was already racing. The sun's warm glow flooded his workshop, chasing away the lingering shadows of his thoughts. He had always found solace in this space, but today it felt different, charged with purpose and anticipation. He took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scent of metal and grease, an alchemy that blended the chaos of his recent revelations with the possibility of newfound clarity. Today was about preparation. He mentally rehearsed the points he wanted to tackle in his next meeting with Eric. There were details to tease out, connections to solidify, and strategies to craft. He felt a growing urgency, not just regarding Caldwell, but in shaping his newfound role as a protector for Mia. The prospect of becoming active in this confrontation ignited something primal within him, an instinct to shield and nurture. After assembling a few tools, Mike began to work on an old motorcycle, a project left half-finished. The rhythmic sounds of his work became a form of meditation, providing a distraction while his mind churned through the details of his plan. Each twist of the wrench became a metaphor for his own tightening resolve. The situation was far more complex than he initially grasped, and he was no longer merely mending machines. He was reforming his identity. When the cool evening air settled around him, Mike cleaned up and headed toward the diner, where he was to meet Eric once again. The fleeting blur of the streetlights illuminated his path with patches of brightness, a reminder of the hope he sought amid the encroaching darkness of his circumstances. He surveyed the bustling diner as he entered, spotting Eric at a corner booth, his face a mixture of excitement and concern. "Mike, it's good to see you again," Eric greeted him, but Mike sensed an undercurrent. Both were aware of the gravity of their pursuit. They dove into their conversation, poring over the intel they had gathered the past few days, piecing together the puzzle of Caldwell's operations. As they dissected the information, Mike felt the weight of Eric's gaze. "What's your take on this, Mike? You've got instincts that can cut through the noise," Eric pressed, sensing Mike's dual internal struggles, his desire for justice and the urge to protect his family. The words lingered as Mike considered his response. "I want to know everything about Caldwell, his associates, the extent of influence he wields, but," he hesitated, weighing his words carefully, "I need to stick to what feels right. If we have to get our hands dirty, I want to know it's truly necessary." Eric leaned back, nodding slowly, as if to acknowledge the moral boundary Mike was trying to maintain. "You're not just becoming a player, Mike. You're a father. That carries a different weight." The statement hung in the air, igniting something deep within Mike. Could he truly maintain that balance? He gathered his thoughts, breath steadying. "I can't let our engagement with Caldwell spiral into a grisly affair. I'm committed to understanding the lay of the land first. The moment we find him acting against my family, that's when we act." After their discussion, Mike could feel clarity sharpening his earlier uncertainties. He wasn't merely stepping into the role of a survivor. He was emerging as a strategist, a guardian, and a respected ally. As Mike left the diner, his heart raced. That was not just a meeting. It marked a turning point towards embracing the risks that lay ahead. He glanced back over his shoulder at Eric, whose face reflected respect and alliance, and knew that together they were assembling not only a strategy, but a calm before the storm. Later that night, as he readied for bed, he replayed the conversation with Eric in his mind. Each exchange hung heavy with potential consequence. Rising to confront Caldwell felt like a dark promise on the horizon. And in this new chapter of his life, Mike understood that his resolve needed to be unbreakable. Yet, as his eyelids grew heavy, a creeping thought slinked into his mind. Were they prepared for what they were about to unleash? The reckoning with Caldwell might reveal truths far darker than either had anticipated. Tomorrow loomed ahead, a new chapter dotted with uncertainty, and Mike could not shake the feeling that the risks he was taking would soon test the very fabric of his commitment to Mia. What would unfold when they finally confronted Caldwell? The chilling dawn arrived with a whimper, colored by the doubts creeping through Mike's mind. He pulled himself from the warmth of his bed, the sunlight slicing through the curtains, igniting fragments of determination within him. Each ray illuminated the reality that today was no ordinary day. It would mark a shift in his life trajectory, a leaning into the storm he knew awaited him. As he quickly dressed, Mike's thoughts spiraled around the meeting with Eric, nervous anticipation mingling with the clarity of purpose he had chiseled the night before. He needed to sharpen his strategy. The stakes felt unbearably high, the weight heavier than he had ever felt before. Becoming proactive meant stepping out from behind the quiet walls of his workshop into a chaotic world that embodied both danger and opportunity. Fueled by adrenaline, he navigated the mental maze of considerations. What specific shootouts would they employ against Caldwell? How would they collect intel without becoming their adversary's target? Each question wrestled with his instinct to protect Mia and the need to confront the malevolence that threatened their safety. Arriving at the diner revealed something new. It wasn't just a mundane meeting place anymore. It had transformed into a battleground, albeit one that existed in hushed conversations and furtive glances. Mike spotted Eric already at their booth, scanning the room with the watchfulness of someone attuned to threat, something Mike realized he also had to adopt. "Ready?" Eric asked, his tone steely yet supportive. "More than ever," Mike replied, though doubt lingered. Like an unwelcome shadow, they dove into discussions about the intelligence he had gathered. Each fact, each name, sketched on the napkin before them, began to provide contours of a network that felt both enticing and terrifying. With every detail they uncovered about Caldwell's operations, Mike felt a tug of recognition. This was a puzzle he was determined to solve, a mission he could not walk away from. Yet, as they plotted, Mike's thoughts diverged. He saw a familiar face enter the diner and pause just beyond the threshold. It was Mrs. Thompson, the elderly neighbor who always offered him a knowing smile while tending to her garden. Today, her expression was troubled as she scanned the faces inside. Instinctively, he felt drawn to her, an inexplicable connection that transcended their mundane exchanges. "Take a moment," Mike said to Eric, rising from the booth. Crossing over to Mrs. Thompson, Mike noticed her wringing her hands, a telltale sign of worry. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Thompson?" he gently asked. She looked up, eyes shimmering with unspilled fears. "Mike, I haven't seen you and Mia around much these days. I've been hearing things, unsettling things about Caldwell. You know he's not what he seems." Her warning coiled around him, an unexpected thread he hadn't considered. "What have you heard?" "Just whispers from the community," she hesitated, glancing back toward the door. "Things about shipments late at night, talk of connections that go miles beyond what you see on the surface." Her words crashed against him, a wave against his shore of certainty. He had considered Caldwell a localized threat, but now he felt the tremors of something much larger, the hint of a criminal web that could ensnare not just him, but the entire area, something far beyond a simple neighbor feud. As he returned to the booth, urgency gripped him. The sense of an ominous storm brewing intensified. "Eric, we need to probe deeper. We might not be just up against a man. We're standing at the gates of something bigger." The gravity of their undertaking shifted palpably, and the stakes clawed at Mike's resolve. He was no longer pursuing Caldwell as a singular figure, but confronting a looming shadow that stretched beyond his backyard. The peril coiling around Mia manifested in a way he hadn't perceived before. This was not merely about protecting her from one adversary, but preparing for a confrontation with an entire web of malevolence that put everything he held dear in jeopardy. Days of mediating between right and wrong weighed heavily, yet today would be different. As he and Eric set out to gather more information, Mike felt the palpable need to confront Caldwell and unveil whatever lurked behind that impenetrable facade. In that moment, he realized something crucial. He wasn't simply stepping onto the battlefield for Mia's safety. He was fighting for his own clarity, for the truth that had hidden in the shadows, layered beneath the surface of his mundane existence. And as they exited the diner,
the questions hung tantalizingly in the air, spinning webs of tension. What would they unearth when they finally blinded Caldwell with the light of their determination? What darkness do they dare unravel in their pursuit of truth? The air was thick with the urgency of their mission as Mike and Eric stepped out of the diner, the sunlight now feeling more like a spotlight illuminating their resolve. They exchanged a look, a silent agreement that today was pivotal, a day that would either shatter illusions or forge a new path forward. Mike's mind raced as they headed toward his truck, strategizing their next moves. "We need to start asking the right people," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "The local shop owners, maybe even that mechanic down the street who seems to know everyone." Eric nodded in agreement, his expression reflecting the seriousness of their task. "But we need to be cautious. We can't let Caldwell catch wind of our plans. He has eyes everywhere." It was those eyes that haunted Mike as they drove through familiar streets. He had always thought of this town as a safe haven, a place where stories unfolded quietly amidst blooming gardens and friendly waves. Yet now he felt an undercurrent of dread, as if shadows clung to the corners of every street. The sense of safety that had once enveloped him felt like a distant memory. They arrived at Benny's Auto Repair, the only place Mike felt comfortable continuing their investigation. Benny was gruff, but his loyalty to the community was unwavering. Mike maneuvered the conversation toward local happenings, carefully dropping hints about Caldwell. Benny leaned closer, his expression growing serious. "Caldwell?" Benny scoffed. "You mean the guy with more connections than a telephone wire? Don't poke that bear unless you're ready for it." The warning was clear, and the way Benny's eyes darted around made Mike's pulse quicken. "What do you know about him?" Mike pressed, trying to conceal the apprehension curling in his gut. Benny hesitated, weighing his words. "Let's just say he doesn't mess around. Folks have gone missing after trying to step out of line. If he's got you in his sights, you might want to reconsider the fight." Mike's heart sank, the reality of their situation becoming all too clear. They were not just dealing with a neighborhood nuisance. They were entwined in something far more dangerous. Yet beneath the fear simmered a flicker of determination. This wasn't just about Caldwell anymore. It was his moment to reclaim his life from the shadows. As they exited Benny's, Mike made a decision. "We have to confront him. The only way to dismantle this network is to face him directly." Eric's brow furrowed. "Are you sure? That could blow up in our faces." "I can't wait anymore," Mike said, his voice taking on a resoluteness that even surprised him. "The longer we wait, the more power he gains. I need to know what Caldwell is hiding. If this is as serious as Benny says, we can't afford to tiptoe around it." A palpable tension gripped the air as they drove toward Caldwell's property. Mike's hands tightened around the wheel, a mix of fear and adrenaline propelling him forward. He felt stripped bare, exposed to an impending confrontation that was no longer just about survival, but about unearthing a truth he desperately needed to confront. Suddenly, Eric's phone buzzed, slicing through Mike's spiraling thoughts. With a quick glance, he saw a message flash across the screen, a tip they desperately needed about Caldwell's dealings. The notification felt like a lifeline thrown into murky waters, but it also compounded their urgency. "Let's stop at the park," Mike suggested, voice edged with intensity. "We need to think this through before we make any move." They parked at the edge of the park, the serenity of the surrounding landscape clashing violently with the storm brewing within Mike. He stared into the distance, where children played, unaware of the shadows shifting just beyond their world. Would he be able to maintain that innocence for Mia? As he briefed Eric on their next moves, a chilling thought crept in. What if Caldwell was more aware of their investigation than they anticipated? What if they were already in over their heads?
The stakes were rising, and as Mike faced the decisions ahead, he could no longer deny the dawning realization. This fight wasn't just for Mia's safety, but for his very essence, his sense of self that had been compromised by fear and uncertainty. He took a deep breath, feeling a newfound clarity swell within him. He needed to stand tall, to be the protector he aspired to be. The moment was approaching, and as they gathered their resolve, the question loomed larger than ever. Would facing Caldwell bring the answers they sought, or would it plunge them deeper into the darkness waiting just below the surface? The park buzzed with life, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within Mike. He instinctively stepped away from Eric, needing a moment to gather his thoughts. The gentle rustle of leaves above belied the violent storm brewing beneath the surface of their plans. He took in the scene, laughter, the bright colors of playground equipment, a dog chasing a frisbee. Each moment of normalcy aggravated the knot in his gut, reminding him of how fragile life could be. "Mike," Eric's voice broke through, pulling him back. "What's our angle with Caldwell? Surely we need a strategy beyond just rolling up to his door." The question hung thick in the air. Mike's mind flashed back to his childhood, a time of more innocent battles, with makeshift swords and brave declarations against foes imagined. He was different now. The stakes were more than mere childhood pretenses. The heart of the matter was himself, and now Mia too. "Let's approach it like a spider weaving a web," Mike finally said, his voice low but steady. "We need to carefully consider every move and anticipate where the strands connect. We have to draw him out, make him think he's in control." "Like baiting a trap," Eric replied, his brow furrowed but a hint of admiration creeping in. "Yes, exactly," Mike said, finding an unexpected thrill in the strategy. "We get what we need by circling around the truth until he reveals it, and we do it out of sight." As a father, Mike often felt torn between the aspiration of being a protector and the reality of feeling like an imposter in his own life. But beneath the chaos now, he could channel that tension into focus. He could be the leader his daughter needed. The stakes were immensely personal, and the urgency it brought was refreshing. "All right," Eric affirmed, nodding. "Let's think about the logistics. We need to gather intel subtly. The people Caldwell interacts with regularly, the suppliers, the low-level guys. If we can find a way in through them, maybe we can make Caldwell think we're just interested in something innocent." Mike glanced around the park again, noticing a group of teens lingering by the basketball court, their conversations animated with the thrill of youth. They were a reminder of resilience, of carving one's path through courage. "We'll start small, digging up small talks. We can propose casual conversations, collect bits and pieces until we have a cohesive picture." Eric looked at him, a spark igniting in his eyes. "You mean like old-school sleuthing? I'm in." Mike smirked at the thought. "Yeah, but we keep it safe. I won't put Mia at risk." That commitment fortified him further. It wasn't just about unraveling Caldwell's grip. It was about reclaiming the life that bristled with the potential for joy instead of fear. In that instant, he acknowledged an unshakable truth. He would fight, not merely for survival, but for purpose. As they parted ways to gather intel, determination pulsed through Mike's veins. His curiosity intertwined with a caution as questions mounted in his mind. Who could he trust? What would Caldwell do if he suspected paranoia creeping around? Every step toward Caldwell felt like stepping onto a tightrope, fraught with risk, yet imbued with an exhilarating sense of agency. Under the watchful eyes of the park, Mike took a deep breath and recognized the weight of his own decisions. Slowly, he was molding himself into the architect of change, for him and for Mia. As the day slipped into twilight, the park grew quieter, and with Eric's promise to update him later, the looming sense of uncertainty morphed into anticipation. Caldwell awaited, but so did the truth. It was then Mike realized. Sometimes frontiers weren't merely places, they were embedded in personal resolve. But even as he felt that resolve strengthen, another thought niggled at him, sending a chill down his spine. If he unravels Caldwell's empire, would he be able to handle the forces that would inevitably retaliate? Would stepping into the light push him back into the dark? The answers lay ahead, just beyond the shadows. The next morning began with the steady hum of the coffee maker echoing through Mike's small kitchen. As the aroma permeated the air, he allowed himself a brief moment of tranquility, standing at the counter with a mug in hand. Yet beneath the surface of that calm lied the electric tension of impending confrontation. Today would mark the first true step in their plan against Caldwell, and he couldn't shake the mix of anxiety and excitement coursing through him. The clock ticked ominously, nudging him towards action. He needed to connect with Eric. Their plan required synchronization. Pulling on a jacket over his sleeves, he stepped outside, the cool morning air reviving him. He felt alert, the weight of yesterday's worries drifting away with each step down the street. Mike caught a glimpse of a newspaper lying crumpled on a neighbor's porch. Flashed headlines declaring another arrest tied to local syndicates echoed in his mind. With every news story like that, Caldwell's grip on the community became more apparent. The danger became less abstract. It felt like a tangible wall pressing down around him. He meandered to the closest cafe, its intimate atmosphere calming yet alive with conversations, a stark contrast to the urgency gearing up within him. He slid into a booth and pulled out his phone, shooting a quick message to Eric. "Ready for today? Let's meet ASAP." The reassurance of their alliance filled him with a sense of purpose. Soon Eric arrived, looking energized yet visibly tense. The subtle furrow in his brow spoke volumes as he joined Mike at the table. "All right, what's the plan?" Eric inquired, leaning in. Mike had spent the night refining their approach and felt the pieces falling together. "We start with the low-level suppliers," he said, his voice steady. "I've scoped out a couple who frequent the store nearby. They're our interface. We need to get them talking. Casual matters first, then we work in our questions." "Think they'll bite?" Eric asked, scrutinizing their strategy. "It's not about them. It's about the crumbs we pick up," Mike replied, the thrill of strategy pulsing through him. They finished their coffee swiftly, each sip fueling their resolve. Mike felt the shift in himself, his frustrations evolving into a penetrating focus. He was no longer simply a father wrestling with fears. He was an agent of change. He was ready to face whatever Caldwell's world could throw at him. As they left the cafe and navigated the streets, Mike observed the small things. A man watering his garden, kids riding bikes, locals gossiping outside the laundromat. Each scene fortifying his belief that this was worth fighting for. Yet another nagging thought occurred. How easily normality could turn to chaos. One misguided step could unravel it all. After an hour of waiting for a break in the routine at the corner store, their patience was rewarded when two men strolled in, laughter filling the air like confetti. Both looked familiar. They were known regulars, likely involved in Caldwell's network. Cautiously, Mike and Eric moved closer, their conversation lightening the atmosphere. As the men engaged the cashier, they dropped hints about Caldwell's recent dealings. Mike's pulse quickened. Each remark provided fragments of a larger puzzle. The duo's comfort with sharing provided a glimmer of hope. They were petty players in a game whose stakes were much larger. But then the air shifted. One of the suppliers cast a suspicious look in their direction, eyes narrowing for a moment before returning to jovial banter that felt suddenly forced. Mike's heart raced. Could they feel the scrutiny? It was a reminder of the thin line between inquiry and exposure. "Let's get out of here," he whispered urgently to Eric. They separated quickly, traversing the street while processing the delicate balance they'd just engaged in. Did they push too far, or were they just getting started? As they spiraled away, adrenaline coursed through Mike, affirming him of his senses. This was only the beginning. One wrong move could spiral into chaos, and revealing their intent now might cost them everything. Yet excitement thrummed beneath the surface of his caution. They were onto something. But a chill crept into Mike's spine as they turned, a single thought crystallizing. If the truth about Caldwell began to unravel, how far would it take him down the rabbit hole? Secrets and shadows awaited, teetering at the edge of discovery. And with it, the most provocative question lingered in his mind. What other secrets lay beneath the surface, waiting to emerge? The sun climbed higher, casting a sharp light on the path ahead as Mike and Eric regrouped a few blocks away. The excitement of their preliminary success was tempered by an unspoken awareness of the precariousness of their situation. As they stood near a well-used public bench, Mike's mind churned with the implications of the fragments they had begun to collect. They had entered uncharted territory, and each choice moving forward would require precision. "Did you sense the tension?" Mike observed, glancing sideways at Eric. "Those guys knew we were listening." "That's what makes this a bit tricky," Eric agreed, rubbing the back of his neck. "If we raised any suspicions, they might close ranks and stop talking." "Then we need to act fast," Mike countered, a sense of urgency solidifying in his chest. "Let's put together a more structured plan to probe Caldwell's connections further. We can't let this slip through our fingers." Days of passive concern had morphed into a determined drive, solidifying Mike's resolve to confront whatever darkness loomed behind Caldwell's wealth. He took a deep breath. This was a pivotal moment, not just in their investigation, but in carving out a new path for himself. Reflecting on the neighborhood he had called home, he felt a newfound sense of responsibility settle over him. While personal ambition often reignited old dreams, this was about more than achieving a better life. It was about safeguarding Mia's future.
He would not allow her to grow up in a world overshadowed by Caldwell's grasp. As they began outlining potential leads, Mike's thoughts were interrupted by a resonant sense of purpose. He envisioned Mia's laughter echoing through their home. A simple moment felt monumental in that context. He wanted her to inherit hope, not fear, a legacy of action, not a lineage of inaction. "We should follow up with that mechanic friend you mentioned," Mike suggested, redirecting their attention. "He might have insights into Caldwell, and if he's well connected, we could learn more about the general atmosphere surrounding him without tipping him off." "That could work," Eric replied, his initial caution waning as the momentum shifted back in their favor. "But we have to be smart about it. Anything we say could get back to Caldwell." Agreed. The following day unfolded with a palpable sense of tactical urgency, each moment swirling with possibilities. They secured a meeting at a local garage known for its discretion. The owner, Frank, was not only skilled but had spent years in the trade, understanding the complex webs woven between car parts, shady deals, and Caldwell's circle. "Let's approach this like a chess game, Mike," Eric suggested as they entered the garage, its walls stained with oil and stories. "We need to think 3 moves ahead." Frank greeted them with a nod and a look of guarded curiosity. After exchanging pleasantries, Mike dove into the conversation. "Frank, we've heard some interesting things about Caldwell. Anything you might share?" A shadow crossed Frank's face, clearly torn between loyalty and the instincts to protect his business. "Caldwell's got a lot of reach, guys. People think they can play nice with him, but it's a damn tightrope. One wrong step, and he'll wipe out anyone who gets too close." Mike felt the knot in his stomach twist tighter. "Why do you say that?" "Let's just say I've seen fates of businesses who crossed him. He's connected with some unsavory folks, people who would think nothing of doing harm if they feel threatened," Frank replied, eyes darting around the room. It was exactly the confirmation Mike needed. Caldwell's realm extended far beyond what he had assumed. Yet within that revelation lay something deeper. If Caldwell had created an empire built on fear, there must be a countermeasure. That countermeasure could be truth. "Do you know of any suppliers that deal with Caldwell, the kinds of shipments he gets? We're looking for details, nothing obvious," Mike inquired, trying to draw Frank into a shared sense of purpose. "Most are just looking to make a quick buck," Frank replied, but he leaned in slightly, voice lowered. "I can introduce you to a couple of guys. Just be careful. Tread lightly." Days turned into weeks as Mike, fueled by newfound purpose and clarity, began to weave their inquiry deeper into the fabric of Caldwell's network.
Each new connection felt like a thread in an intricate web, strategic and cautious, but tangibly powerful. In these conversations, he
discovered layers of connections, revealing the broader picture of Caldwell's influence, uncovering not just facts, but the impact of his actions on countless lives. The balance between caution and ambition was tense, but Mike thrived on it. With each piece of information, he was reclaiming not only his power, but a voice lost in the shadow of fear. With the dusk of anticipation hanging heavily in the air on one pivotal evening, Mike returned home, more at peace than he had felt in a long time, recalling the laughter that filled the walls of their modest home. In this inner atmosphere breathed a newfound strength, a resolve to protect and elevate. Finally, the moment arrived for him to reveal his plans to Mia. No longer just a single father bearing weight, he was transforming his approach, eager to empower her with new lessons of resilience. He sat down next to her as she tackled homework. "Mia, sometimes life gets messy. You never back down from a challenge. You hear me? There will be times you need to stand up for what's right," he began, drawing on the conversation they had shared about standing firm in adversity. Mia looked up, her eyes wide with interest. "Like in those superhero movies." "Exactly," Mike said with a soft chuckle. "We may not wear capes, but standing strong in your values feels just like that." Thus, he unraveled the threads of their journey thus far. Sharing the nuances of courage transformed every shadow into a lesson. A ripple of growth emerged, revealing the importance of truth, integrity, and resilience, not merely as abstract concepts, but as everyday tools for navigation. As he spoke, the entirety of Mike's transformation crystallized within him. The fight against Caldwell accelerated his metamorphosis into a guardian, not just of Mia's dreams, but of his own. A legacy taking root within the foundation of hope laid out for them both. This critical moment established the personal achievement that defined his journey. Mike was no longer shackled by fear. Instead, he embraced clarity, shifting from simply surviving to thriving. With every decision, he reinforced a commitment to forge a reality richer than dreams once chased. His eyes met Mia's, certainty assuring amid vulnerability. She was their future, lit with boundless potential, navigated by the bravery he had rediscovered. He understood then, the true victory was not solely about confronting Caldwell, but rather illuminating their own path together. A flicker of hope ignited, and as the dawning sun cast rays through the window, Mike stood, ready to reclaim the ownership of his life and the vivid reality waiting on the horizon. What lies ahead had yet to unfold, but Mike would face it boldly, with Mia by his side, certain of their place in the world and anchored by resolute commitment to truth. For the viewer who has journeyed alongside Mike, this is the moment to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click matters. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Let's dive into discussions that matter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion and embark on their own journeys of discovery. Don't wait even one more second. Join the community transforming lives, one story at a time.